of my presentation. Is that available to everyone right away so they could follow along if they wanted to with my PDF? Or does that come up later?
I don't know if it's available for everybody. We should actually be able to see it now already. Is that the case or not? Yeah.
I see two things, but
there's tuning BIBFRAME, PowerPoint, and Redbook. The PDF.
Redbook one is mine. Okay, good. Just in
I
case
can see it and I can open it. So yeah.
Excellent.
We can tell people that they can just have a look at the session presentation page. That's perfect.
And there's Kevin. Hey, Kevin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Nancy, you're not nervous, right?
You know, I'm.
There's no need.
I know. I'm just mostly nervous because I've had to put out 2 fires already this morning.
Okay, but Kevin is here.
And it's only 9:30 in the morning here. So.
Oh yeah, you kept me busy all night, right? No, but actually I slept. I got the message at 2 in the morning, and the other one at 5 in the morning.
You know, we're doing a job interview today, and suddenly our director said, "Oh, I can't see anybody till September," and our job interview already started, and it's just so. And hi, Tammy. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet everybody.
So I've never been on this end of a webinar before. Are we in webinar format or are we in meeting format?
Actually, I think it's a webinar, and there's a question and answer tab with open, answered, and dismissed questions. I hope Jeanette is familiar with this.
Okay.
You're still muted. Jeanette, you're muted.
During the Q&A session, people can type their questions into the Q&A. That'll show up as open, and as one by one, as we answer them, we can move them to answer.
Mm-hmm. So you're familiar with that, and you will take care of that, I guess. Huh?
Yeah.
And I will also keep an eye on all these questions and
otherwise, Kevin,
moderate the Q&A part of it.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just really like when you're a presenter, it's a lot like a webinar. I mean, like a ordinary Zoom session.
So I just unmute myself and start talking. Yeah. Okay, cool. Sounds good. I just wasn't sure if I had if there was anything else I needed to do before then.
So I guess participants can just join. So far we have 4 attendees.
And we're saving the question and answers till the very end, right?
Like I would say Q&A at every at the end of each presentation, right?
Okay.
So Tammy, you go first. You have like 25 minutes or so, 20-25 minutes. The remainder we have for Q&A, about 15 minutes. And then at past we switch.
Okay, that sounds good.
And did the same for the other presentation.
Just out of curiosity, can if I go short, so if I don't fill the full time and there aren't a lot of questions, the next group will just start a little earlier?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Don't worry, we'll handle that. Usually
silence.
I don't know how many cross topics there are between the both of the presentations, you know, like comparing things between them. We'll find out. Sometimes it happens that the people actually start discussing really towards the end, like when they kind of wake up, they notice that they can actually engage in an active discussion. And before, they're also sometimes being polite because they don't want to interrupt you during the presentation too early. So it's also a bit awkward, like to ask many questions at the beginning, and you could actually just wait and see whether the presenter will actually cover it. So what happens often is that towards the end there are many questions also coming up, because one discussion triggers the next and so on.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like we overlap that much topic-wise. So, but we're ready whenever you're done.
Yeah.
So
I asked because I have a tendency to be short and not.
Well, we're happy about that, and it's great that you're
that's
going
probably
first.
good. To be honest, Kevin and I have a
tendency of going long.
Over, so.
Yeah.
It's harder when you're the two of you, you know.
Yeah, it's hard when
each thinks,
two.
They can grab a bit more.
And when you're trying to explain modeling, it can go on longer than you expect it to sometimes. But.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how you're doing the music modeling, because I'm doing a lot of work in the field of performing arts.
Oh, cool. Well,
so there will be probably some questions. Are you also trying to cover events when you're doing music? You're just recordings, huh?
Really just medium of performance and a bit about compilations.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we would be going on for like 6 hours.
Yeah. But do you properly
I've given talks about events before.
Works. Yeah, well, I will ask you later.
Okay,
we'll start in 1 minute.
Okay.
I'm now going to turn on the recording. I think we're already being live streamed. And then we have about 1 minute to go and we will start. People are dropping in. We're now at 39 attendees. Still going up. Yeah, so welcome everybody. My name is Beat Estermann. I'm joining you from Bern, Switzerland. I'm today's facilitator for this session. I'm aided by Jeanette Ho, who will take care of the chat and question and answer tab. We'll have 2 presentations during this session. Each presentation will have about 45 minutes. Allotted, and this time will be split up between the actual presentation, which should last about 20-25 minutes, then followed by a Q&A session. Tammy Moorse will go first. She's going to present about moving from flat to linked data in a community resources database. Tammy is the project coordinator for the Red Book of Community Information at Hamilton Public Library in the province of Ontario, Canada. She's a certified database curator with a broad background in cataloging metadata and digital asset management. Tammy also teaches metadata design and cataloging at the iSchool of the University of Washington. Tammy, the floor is yours.
Okay, I am just
share
going
your
to share my
presentation.
screen.
By the way, the presentations of this session are already available also on the session description page. If you want to have a look, you can directly have a look there as well and kind of go through the presentations at your speed.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining me for part of this session. Just to say that this is a discussion or a presentation on moving from flat to linked data in a community resource database. This database is live to the public. You can access it at redbook.hpl.ca. And what happened was Hamilton Public Library acquired this database from a not-for-profit group in 2019. We relaunched both a website and a backend database in December of this year. And we agreed to act, the library agreed to act as a steward of this important data set for the community of Hamilton. In doing this project, we looked at vendors who were selling databases for the human services sector, and we opted to create something in-house using our own in-house IT and cataloging departments. It is built on a Drupal platform, currently Drupal 8. It will be moving to Drupal 9 when we can. But just know that, unfortunately, I am not a developer or programmer. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me via email, and I can connect you with that team to get you answers to specific questions. So what you see here is the public end of the database. This is what you see on the website. It's optimized for accessibility issues as per the regulations set out in our province, which is the AODA Act, and it scales in all types of browsers. The goals for my session will be to let you know what the Red Book of Community Information is, the metadata structure in linked data, how we moved from flat files to linked data and some of the learnings that we had in there, and then some of the next steps we have planned for this database. So what is the Red Book of Community Information? So this resource collects and presents data about nonprofit, community-based, and charitable organizations operating in or providing services to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. It is maintained in accordance with the AIR standard. That's the Alliance of Information and Referral Systems. We use a metadata schema designed to be used with the AIR standards. It's developed through a group called Open Referral and is referred to as the HSDS, the Human Services Data Set. And I'll circle back to this later in the presentation. So what is in the database? Currently, we have around 4,000 linked records. Each record contains addresses or an address, phone numbers, email addresses, websites, contact information in terms of like people's names and things like that, all public information, so there's no privacy issues here. A description of the service that is being provided, how to access the service, how to be eligible for the service, the languages that are offered in, and then taxonomy is assigned to each of those records. The entire focus for all of this is for users such as community members and local professionals like social workers and support workers to search in the database, find resources that either meet their information need or their client's information need. So we offer things like church services and church service times, federal and provincial service records, local community records like the dental health bus, falls prevention, places that support food insecurity like food banks, local fairs, seasonal event dates, and local service clubs, and those kind of things. So this is what a general search will result in. It displays, this is a keyword search based on the word food banks, and it shows not only, all the results, but also an interactive map so you can click on the pins. We opted not to offer an advanced search on a separate page or as a drop down. We offer filters. So you click on the checkbox, you click on the box, check it, and you can filter the results that you get from your general search. We also have autocomplete. So if you start to type, if there's an organization that you're particularly looking for, it will offer an autocomplete and suggest different services or organizations to you. If you click through on any of the results, this is what you get in return. So this is for the Salvation Army Dundas Food Bank. We have a public note in the gray at the top. We have a lot of these right now because of the pandemic. They're meant to trigger you or the user to know that there's something that they need to be aware of. Then we provide a short description. The link data comes in the organizations that offer this service and sites that offer this service. Then we go through hours, an interactive map, and contact information, including social media. If you scroll down further, this is just the second part of that same screen grab. You can see it offers information on how to be eligible, the areas that it serves, if there is a fee to access the service. Service is only available in English. Sometimes it's available in multiple languages. If there is an application, such as for records related to Hamilton Public Library, there is a link there to go and get a library card. And then it provides a contact person, and just a little further down, it provides the taxonomy terms, which are linkable and fully browsable. So what else the Redbook is we are a data provider. We provide all the data that you see in the database to Ontario 211. For those who aren't familiar, Ontario 211 and the 211 services are a phone service and text service where you can call and talk with a person who does something like a reference interview. For those of you who have an MLIS or a library background, it's called a referral interview. They ask questions that are non-judgmental, and they look up services and then provide you with some references that you can go and follow up on. So we provide all of the information about the City of Hamilton and its services to Ontario 211, which is our provincial 211 service. We also offer this data to those who are interested through Creative Commons license. We also provide niche subsets of data for local projects. We have a partnership currently with McMaster University for a study they're doing on social prescription for older adults. And then finally, we also curate companion partner sites. So what these sites are is, again, a subset and curated site of the main set of Redbook data. We built a module as part of the new database that allows us to do these in a very easy manner, so we don't always have to go through our IT department to set up a full website. This is one of the two that we offer. What happens is each heading you see, like community gardens, draws from a set of background taxonomy terms that are assigned to each record when we create them. And then we tell the module to publish just the records with those taxonomy terms to this subsite. Each subsite is updated every single night with any updates that we've made to the database. Each site offers a dynamic PDF. So where it says download the guide, it immediately triggers a PDF with the most up-to-date information. So that would have been updated the night before, so that everything is always up to date for those who are accessing this. Currently, this is the food access guide. So this is about eating well in the City of Hamilton. We provide this in conjunction with, in consultation with the public health dietitians at the City of Hamilton. The other site we do is the community resources in Hamilton for older adults. Again, this is not done in conjunction. We're looking for a partner to give us some guidance on this, but this is based on an older resource that hadn't been updated since 2017. And again, it is highly curated so that seniors get, and people looking to help seniors get exactly what they're looking for. So from all of that, what does the metadata structure look like in linked data? Most metadata was sort of designed for that flat file database system. And what we were lucky to have was a schema where the data could be used in a flat file or could be looked at for a linked data project. So what we have is the Human Services Data Specifications by Open Referral. This is an open data group that looks at creating a metadata schema that can be used interoperably amongst those who share data in the human services sector, like what we do with Ontario 211. And all of their documentation, if you're interested, is available on their site. The interoperability is a big feature, and we've been working with Ontario 211 to do some mapping. So the HSDS outlines 4 main tables for their schema. Organizational data, which is for a group that provides a service. Service data, so this documents that service with a description, classification, information to allow potential users to identify services that meet their needs, such as eligibility and fees. Location data, where a service is located either physically or virtually, because there are some services that are offered only virtually. And then a 4th table that's called the service at location data. This is a table that sort of links to the other 3, particularly to the service and to the location. And it's meant to record where data might be different for a service, like different hours or a different website, or some of that extra information that might just be slightly different but still relates to that service. So what we did was we took these tables and we actually increased it to 5. Just for our own sake, it made more sense. We did not do the location at site table. What we did was we did an agency data, which again is that organizational data for a group that provides a service. We did the service data, which again documents the service with a description and classification. We did a specific site where the service or agency is located, either physically or virtually. We created an address table, which uses an open data validation for geographic data. And then we did like a CMS people data table for people who are providing the service or our main contact, or who we can send the public to for information about the service. So this is roughly how everything relates. You can see that the service record is sort of identified for us as our main record, and then the data flows from the address to the service, from the address to the agency and to the site, and the same with the people. Okay. So there was no service at location. What we opted to do was create the links behind the scenes. And particularly this was important for the hours, because hours sometimes differed between when the service offered hours and when the site offered hours. Also things like accessibility. A service doesn't necessarily list how it's accessible, but a site will definitely tell you if they have a wheelchair available elevator, accessible parking for seniors, even an accessible washroom, which is really important if you're accessing certain services. So this is what the back end looks like. This is where all the linking happens. What I'm showing you here is our main service record data entry. So you can see we have a name, and forgive me, this is why I had Beat mentioned that you can see some of this in the PDF that's on the presentation site, because I know some of these screen grabs are difficult to see. It's difficult to get all that stuff into a slide. So you can see here we have sort of a general information tab with a service name, some legacy information, options for an alternate name, and a description. If you scroll down, this particular agency at site is where we bring in the agency record and the site record together into that service record. And what it looks like to the public is the little blue section here in the middle, organizations that offer this service, sites that offer this service. Okay. So moving from flat records to linked data records. So it took the Red Book staff, including myself, a bit of time and a few missteps to get into our heads how to better do linked data and how to better do these records. So I'm just going to go over some of the learnings. Our main goal was to provide consistency for data input. Anytime there's a name or a number, like a phone number or a postal code, those can be transposed, and then you have inaccurate information. So we focused on getting that done consistently, and that's where our open data comes in, and I'll get into that. The other thing we had problems with was naming conventions. We wanted to use the naming convention that we'd used, which was Agency X offers Agency X service at Agency X site. So the agency's name was repeated 3 times. We realized that we didn't have to do that anymore. We could say Agency X, and then it's displayed, offers service Y at site Z. And to remember to do that and to get to that point was it required us to actually go back and re-edit a fair number of records, but it does provide a better browsing experience for the users who are coming to the database. And this is where the best part of that comes in. We also learned that we could do one service record rather than multiple service records for multiple agencies or multiple sites. So what you're looking at here is a list of all the public secondary schools or high schools in the city of Hamilton. And we have a separate record for the Catholic board. There's a Catholic board in Ontario. And we have one for the French board as well. It provides you with the ability to look and see all of the schools, where they're located on the map, so you can figure out which one is closest to you. It also really benefits for things like church services on Sunday. All of the Catholic church services at all of the Catholic churches in Hamilton are now offered on one record rather than 14, and it allows users to have a more comprehensive view of where everything is on a map and what services are being offered. When I was pitching this to my senior leader team, the other scenario I gave was going to your local community center. You know that the community center's there and it offers an arena where you can go and play hockey. But what you do when you go into the Red Book now is you would look at that and it also tells you that it also offers a pool and it offers a library branch and it offers a food bank. And all of that is better for you because you can see that, oh, I'm going there and I have all these additional services that I can access on one trip. All right. So the other things we looked at was data migration. We had to do it, unfortunately, we had to do it manually. We looked at doing bulk export and bulk import, but it was not possible, actually. We could get the addresses and contact people names in, but for things like phone numbers, we would have had to move them around. And particularly for our address records, where we needed to generate and pull in some of that open data, we would have had to go in and manually open all of those records anyways to provide our validation and run some of our linked data checks. So doing it manually also allowed us to weed the database because we inherited it. We ended up weeding about 500 and 600 records for organizations that were no longer operating or had changed the service platform. We also were able to create all of those linked records. So what we did was we started connecting our database and bringing in open data. It provides a lot of good context. So what we're able to pull in is open data from some of the government open data portals that are available in our area. Things like Open Ontario, Open Hamilton, and Open Data Canada, which provide us with things like longitude, latitude, provide us with ward information for the different sections of the city, provide us with federal riding information as well. This is what our address lookup looks like. You put in the geocode address, it looks up longitude, latitude, and then it provides you with the region and the ward. And this is sort of what it looks like after you've saved the record. It generates the map and tells you all the information you might want to have. Where this goes is we push this data out again. So part of the library being very heavily involved with the city of Hamilton is we wanted to participate in that Open Hamilton platform that they offer. So nightly, all of our data is exported to a REST endpoint URL in both JSON and CSV. All the data is then taken from there and drawn into the Open Hamilton platform to be used by the public or researchers in GIS software, particularly in this case, it's Esri. It allows you to, with the longitude, latitude, create these interactive story maps where you can then see where resources or organizations are being offered or where there might be deserts where no services are being offered. Also, we have those curated data sets and the curated resource guides, and all of this sits behind the Hamilton Public Library domain, which is hpl.ca. It provides us with a really good experience with the search engines. We come up very high in search engine results when you go and search for anything that's in the Red Book. So there's a lot of traffic pushed through to us from, say, Google. So our next steps. What we're still doing is fine-tuning our search engine. We found that users were really frustrated because we were giving them the agency site and service records. And so there was duplication, and oftentimes they would click on the record that they didn't want. And we found that what they really wanted was the service record above all else. So in our public search, we've turned off the agency records so they will not show up, which meant that people are actually more happy with what they're getting. We are considering turning off our site records as well. It's not to say that they're not there, they just don't appear in the public search. So we're providing actually fewer records on the public search, but it's actually making for happier users because the consistency and the precision is better. The other thing we're exploring is API mapping. So we're going to be using an API to send our data into Ontario 2-in-1's database. We're also be using an API to pull data from Ontario 2-in-1's database for federal and provincial records into our database. And part of what we want to do to keep our database up to date is create both a web form and some kind of bot or spider that will go out, check the website that we have on file for those records, like the service or the organization, and pull in data that's been changed. So if the address has been changed or the phone number has been changed, we'd be able to pull it in automatically and have an editor approve that change. And then we want to do some better curated data exports. So that is it for me. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Thank you, Tammy, for this interesting presentation. The floor is now open for the audience's questions. We've now 89 participants in the session, so I'm curious to hear what your reactions were, or also your questions.
Oh, thank you. Someone's saying really cool project. I think there's a lot of potential here for leveraging open data. And I'm secretly hoping that as a cataloger and metadata person, I'm secretly hoping that as we move into BIBFRAME and looking at some of the new authorities, that more authorities will consider offering some kind of open data platform or schema so that you can actually go like with a REST endpoint and pull that data in automatically into your database or into your, like, say, public access catalog or ILS. How have the agencies reacted? For the most part, they've been most of them are really happy to just have a listing. It's created some interesting, some of them haven't actually seen what we do yet, but everyone agrees that the search feature is so much better. You actually get what you're looking for. One of the biggest complaints we had with the focus groups on the old database was people could never find what they were looking for. And so this way, it really does give you that better, more holistic view, particularly for things like, you'd be surprised, like the municipal services centers, which offer you access to like paying your taxes, information about garbage and that sort of thing. But a couple days a week, it offers passport services from the federal government and access to like Canadian pension plan and the it's called old age security. It's added money for if you're older and you're on a pension. So people are still discovering this. I think it's still very new. We've been trending upwards every month. I think our last month we had about 1,000 daily users. How did you maintain the updates of changes in services? We're still doing that manually. Some of it, because some of this data is actually quite complicated to try and digest and describe, we do have to sometimes call these organizations to make sure that we're actually providing the best information. There are some agencies, like we have one locally called Wesley, who provide a food bank. They provide before and after school programming. They provide for seniors. We actually called them up and said, this is what we've got. Sent them links and said, is this accurate? Is this what you're looking for? And we had a few things to fine tune, but on the most part, we pretty much got it right.
I mean, there are questions in the Q&A session. One of them is, can you talk more about how you come up on Google? Do you use a search engine optimization technique like a schema.org markup?
No, actually, we haven't used any kind of search engine optimization to this point. I know that like the library Google offers the library like an AdWords grant every year, but we haven't taken advantage of that. Really what we found is because the data is unique, because it's hidden behind, or it has hidden as part of the hpl.ca domain, and that's a library, and the search engines know that libraries have good data, that tends to give us a lot of validity. The fact that we are pulling in open data also offers us validity as well. It can see that this is going on, and then it links us to Open Hamilton, which again offers that next level of validity. So, and we're often usually the only ones who've described these services. It's not like we're competing with 3 other places. And for small organizations who may not even have a web presence or have maybe a Facebook presence, we get the top hit because of our validity.
So do you think Google is still crawling the data or still crawling the websites? Or is it, yes. Are they crawling the data directly, accessing the data directly?
they're crawling the data directly. What we found last week through just trial, like pure fluke trial, I was doing a search for something and one of our records came up and it was one of our agency records, which, as I mentioned, we've shut off in the public search, but because Google's crawling all of the data, it's indexing that agency record so you can click right through to it from Google, even though you can't actually search directly for it within our database.
Another person asked, what is your backend? And also, in addition to that, did you consider having a field search rather than entirely masking the agency records?
The backend is Drupal. It's Drupal 8, soon to be migrated to Drupal 9. We found that Drupal, because it's open source and it has lots of modules, my developer was able to pull in various modules for various things with little needed to be enhanced or changed. Again, we're still fine-tuning the search. We wanted to be able to do keyword, but also do auto-suggest. And that seems to be what we're doing now. It does search sort of, Drupal allows us to sort of specify which fields. So we tell it description and the title. But we're going to play around with that a bit more and see if we can get better results going forward. Because it's all about the user, right? Like it doesn't, if they can't find what they're looking for, they're not going to use it.
There's also a usability question. How has your shift to linked data affected the ease or changed the workflow of maintaining the knowledge base? I think that's also very important, you know.
It's easier. It's honestly easier because we have that enter it once, particularly for addresses and contact people, enter it once, and then through a little lookup window. So you create the person, and through the lookup window, you look them up in the service record and it puts the name in for you. The same with the address. You put in the address once and you can look it up for the service, you can look it up for the agency, and you can look it up for the site. And again, it's accurate every single time because you've made it accurate through the geolocation and the open data in the address record. So it's actually quicker.
And so if the information changes, it also automatically gets updated?
It does get automatically updated, but again, with like stuff like addresses, they don't change that much. If we need to really change an address, we'll have to go in and do it behind the scenes, but we're hoping that some of this technology that we're going to program for the next phase will help with that. I mean, heaven help us if they change the federal ridings, we'll have to go in and revalidate all of those, but we may be able to run a bulk validation.
I think there's another question that came up in the chat. How did you maintain the updates of changes in services? I don't think that one was asked already.
So we, as part of the AIR standard, we are expected to at least contact the organization once every 365 days. So there is a built-in workflow that we need to check every 365 days, and we do have a set of counts. So we have like a 30 days, it's due for an update in 30 days. It's due for an update 30 days plus 30 days, and then 90 days. So it does prompt us that we need to go in and check these. And then we do the check, but we are hoping that we can write something that will just go troll the website and prompt us and say, hey, there's been a change. This organization has moved. This organization has a new phone number. This organization's website is no longer running. And then it'll prompt us to do that check as well, if it's sooner than the 365 days.
How do you perceive the evolution of the entire data ecosystem around you? Are other organizations also kind of pushing up their maturity, the maturity of their data?
We have really jumped the queue on this. The main vendors in this area are still operating on basically almost a flat file system where everything has to be done manually. We're the first to go and do as much automation as we can. But it's one of these things that it will pay in the long run to do. And we're hoping that we can at least demonstrate that it's worth doing for the vendor and for their clients.
Okay, and someone else asked, are you able to add new service types easily? Do you ever need to split an existing service?
We haven't had to split an existing service. Actually, more what we've done is we've actually amalgamated. So something that might have been 2 or 3 records, we've actually put into 1 record because we can create a better description of it. I mean, some of it may get split. Say there's a new program that's offered at 2 locations in Hamilton, we may have to do some splitting or at least some rejigging, but that should take us a lot less time than having to find 2 files, 2 records that may not have been related at all because they're flat, and remembering to update both of them because one would be for each site.
Hmm.
So we have reached the end of questions.
That's okay. Again, if anyone has any questions that aren't answered here, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer emails.
We may also take a few more. If anybody is curious, we still have some time. Otherwise, we'll switch to the other presentation. There's Rup asking, what did your flat data format look like? Was it a dead-end website, maybe in PDF format, a printed pamphlet?
No, the previous website was on Drupal, but it was whoever had programmed it didn't quite understand all of the potential modules they could have used in Drupal, and a lot of the hard coding we couldn't actually reprogram around. It was, you know, basically a tabs system where stuff, you know, each field was in a separate tab, or like sets of fields were in multiple tabs and you had to tab through. Now we have it as you know, drop down, basically like collapsible menus all on one screen, so you don't have to keep trying to flip back and forth. You can have all of it open, some of it open, and it makes it a lot faster. But yeah, the hard coding for the previous site, we just couldn't get around it. We couldn't optimize the search engine, and it was. We sunsetted it last week, and we were very happy for it to be gone.
So you're talking about both the back end and the front end, right?
Yeah.
That has become much more modulable then.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, Stephen says, great presentation and Q&A.
Oh, thank you.
So if there are no further questions, I would suggest that we move to the other team, to the next presentation. Next are Nancy Lorimer and Kevin Kishimoto. Nancy is Associate Director for Metadata Services at Stanford University Libraries. She's a member of the Program for Cooperative Cataloging Policy Committee. So the Program for Cooperative Cataloging is also shortened by PCC. She is also the chair of the PCC Metadata Application Profiles Working Group and has been previously the co-chair of the LD4 Profiles Affinity Group. She's a former music cataloger and now concentrates on linked data modeling and implementation strategy. Her colleague, Kevin Kishimoto, is head of music metadata services for Stanford University Libraries. He also serves as chair of the Music Library Association's Linked Data Working Group and the Continuing Education Coordinator, and he is the Continuing Education Coordinator of the Music OCLC Users Group. They're going to present about tuning BIBFRAME, modeling music compilations and medium of performance in BIBFRAME and beyond. So Nancy, I guess you're going first, so the floor is yours.
Okay, and I just want to confirm that you can all see the slides properly.
Yes, that's the case.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our session and letting us talk about our work. Before we would begin, I'd like to pause to acknowledge that we are speaking to you from Stanford and from Redwood City, California. These cities occupy the ancestral and unceded lands of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area, as does our place of work, Stanford University. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people. Today, Kevin and I are going to speak about some specific work that is being done to extend BIBFRAME using the Performed Music Ontology, or PMO, to better describe audio recordings as linked data. Specifically, we will concentrate on the enhanced modeling of medium of performance and compilations, both of which are important to audio resources. We also will show up how it all links up with contributions as well. A very short introduction to PMO. The Performed Music Ontology is an extension to BIBFRAME 2.0, meaning it is intended to be used in conjunction with BIBFRAME, not on its own. For the most part, PMO enriches BIBFRAME with the goal of better modeling and representing relationships important to users in discovering audio resources. It does this primarily through the addition of properties, classes, and vocabularies to BIBFRAME, but in a few important cases, such as medium of performance, actually replaces BIBFRAME properties or classes. Just as an aside, we would like to acknowledge that much of PMO was informed and inspired by both the Doremos and Music Ontology ontologies. The initial development of PMO took place in 2014 to 16 as part of the LD4P grant, the very first linked data for production grant. Participants in this work included representatives from Stanford for the grant, who were actually Kevin and I, the Library of Congress, the Music Library Association, and the Association for Recorded Sound Collections. The ontology in the meantime since has been experimented with by Sinopia users and by the Library of Congress. The initial emphasis of PMO was on three primary aspects: medium of performances, relationships among works, and events. So medium of performance, in case it's not clear, means the instruments, voices, and ensembles used in the performance of a musical work. In relationships among works, one thing was modeling compilations, which is sets of groups of work compiled into a single recording, for instance, and how to relate BIBFRAME works that represent different performances of the same musical work. The other thing we mentioned was on events, the act of a recording as an event, and descriptions of events at which a recording takes place. For this, however, we are concentrating on the first two, medium of performance and in particular compilations and relations among works. So in the past year, we received a request primarily from the Library of Congress to simplify some aspects of the ontology to make it more user-friendly while still fulfilling its goal. We also have taken a new look at compilations with a new and better understanding of the topic that has come over the years. So this talk represents some of that work, which is taken on by Kevin, myself, Jim Soinen of UC San Diego, and Damien Eisenlinger at the Library of Congress. So I will now turn it over to Kevin to talk about medium of performance.
Hi. So yeah, today I get to talk to you about the medium of performance. And during this segment, I'll start by defining medium of performance and explaining its significance. I'll then summarize some of the issues with medium of performance metadata in MARC and BIBFRAME. And next, I will describe the evolution of medium of performance or the Performed Music Ontology between 2016 and 2021, vis-a-vis the medium of performance, and end my section with a quick summary of current work. Next slide, please. So in music metadata, the term medium of performance indicates the instruments, voices, ensembles, and other entities that are used to perform a musical work. For instance, a work's medium of performance might be solo violin, or a 6-part choir, or a funk band. Music users regularly search for specific mediums of performance for both known and unknown item searches. For example, someone might be interested in performing the song Let It Go from Frozen, but they want a score for solo piano without voice. Or maybe they need the music for a full orchestra plus voice. Another typical user request is, I'm looking for recordings of classical guitar. No known work is specified here. So as we developed the Performed Music Ontology, we attempted to address the and improve upon issues relating to medium of performance in both MARC cataloging and in BIBFRAME, which I will briefly summarize now. Next slide. In current MARC cataloging, there are several ways in which medium of performance metadata can be encoded in a bibliographic record. However, each of these methods has its own idiosyncrasies and shortcomings. Both LC subject headings and RDA work authorized access points sometimes contain medium of performance data that could assist users in finding or selecting music resources. But subject headings and access points do not consistently include medium of performance information. Their constructions are based on guidelines and standards that allow complex and accurate recording of medium of performance in some situations, but in other situations only allow for generalized medium information, or none at all. MARC cataloging, of course, allows us to describe a work's medium of performance through pretty thoroughly by writing a detailed free text note, which is, of course, perfectly interpretable by humans, but is not really machine actionable. The next slide. So the newer MARC 382 field, this was developed starting around 2010, enables a more flexible and exact description of a work's medium of performance by supporting complex encoding with many subfields, most of them repeatable. And as you can see here, however, the thing about this is data interpretation is dependent upon the order of the subfield data within a single 382 field, and thus is difficult for a machine to parse. Next slide. Okay, so turning now to BIBFRAME, the BIBFRAME ontology doesn't really offer enough structure to adequately address complex medium or performance description or queries. Next slide. So BIBFRAME has 4 classes that can be used to encode medium or performance data. Music instrument, music voice, music ensemble, and music medium. But 3 of these classes have properties with ranges limited to literals. And the 4th is defined as a summary statement, which doesn't sound very structured to me. Next slide. The medium of performance modeling for PMO in 2016 was originally based on our experience with the MARC 382 encoding. And being aware of the limitations of MARC and BIBFRAME, when creating this first version of the ontology, we hoped PMO would realize the dream of linked data, and that is being able to describe medium of performance for every performance scenario for every type of music. Our guiding questions back then included, what are all the possibilities and how can we model them? So we sometimes went to a level of extreme complexity in order to accommodate exceptional cases. As a result, the ontology became quite complex, and even the simple cases were not always easy to model. Medium of performance in PMO 2016 included a wide range of classes and properties, subclasses and subproperties, and data properties that we felt were necessary to fully and successfully create linked data for medium of performance. Next slide. So 5 years later, we have more experience with linked data and also a slightly different philosophy in our modeling. Now our guiding questions include, do we need to be able to create data for all possible medium of performance configurations, or would we be satisfied with being able to create data for most cases? And what type of medium of performance data would be reasonable and useful in a production setting? So developments in library linked data have also influenced our approach. We now have Sinopia, which allows us to more easily create RDF. And thus we are able to study our ontology on a practical level. Does this modeling actually make sense when we review the data? And with this actual RDF data, we can also begin to experiment with medium of performance queries, some queries that would not be possible in MARC-based systems. So as a result, we've significantly simplified the medium of performance portions of PMO. In 2021, medium of performance reflects the following refinements. The direct relationship of medium performance data to the BIBFRAME work reduces the number of blank nodes. We have also done away with the differentiation between declared versus performed mediums and individual versus ensemble, because we believe that these differentiations can be adequately captured in other parts of the data. We reduced as well the number of data properties, keeping only those that would be more commonly used. And finally, we renamed and clarified definitions for some of the classes and properties whose usages were previously unclear or confusing. So now let's explore a diagram of a single work's medium of performance in additive layers. Next slide. Oh, we skipped one. Can you go back? There we go. So in our 2021 model, a medium component is related directly to the BIBFRAME work with the property has medium component. Most simply, the medium component is a single part of a musical work's overall medium of performance, one type of instrument or voice, or a single ensemble. Next slide. So each medium component has 4 properties: has medium of performance, has medium count, has medium component qualifier, and has number of hands. These properties, along with a BIBFRAME note, can adequately describe most medium components. Next slide. And some musical works have only one medium component, but other works will require more than one. Next slide. This diagram shows a second medium component that is another type of instrument, voice, or ensemble. Obviously, for works with more than 2 mediums of performance, the process would continue similarly. Each would be added as a separate medium component. Next slide. Oh, you skipped one, I think. Yeah, there we go. A separate class up at the top left corner, a medium type, allows use of an established vocabulary to describe the overall size of the combined medium components of the work. The medium type and medium components are used together. Next slide. We are retaining the use of BIBFRAME's music medium class as sort of a general note on the music's medium of performance. And next slide. And finally, a diagram with medium components, medium type, and music medium. This is our full medium performance model. Next slide. So as you can see in this slide, the 2021 version of PMO has significantly fewer classes and properties regarding medium performance than the 2016 version. Next slide. And the group that is examining and reconsidering the 2016 Performed Music Ontology has recently completed its revision of the medium of performance aspects of the ontology. Consequently, the Music Library Association's Linked Data Working Group is currently focusing on this newly revised version of medium of performance modeling. Next slide. So using Sinopia, our first goal is to create a corpus of medium of performance data that we can study and query. We've been working with a pretty simplified work template that hones in on the work's medium of performance. Creating templates within Sinopia, of course, can be an arduous process. And although ideally the tool should not constrain our ontology, in this case, these difficulties on the template creation side and even on the data production side helped me realize that the complexities that we'd originally built into the 2016 version of PMO were neither necessary or at this juncture practical. So while the MLA Working Group's project this summer is primarily focused on medium performance, as our work moves forward, we're planning to expand our experiments into other aspects of PMO, such as aggregates, about which Nancy will be speaking next. Thanks.
And hello again. So I am now going to shift to our second topic, modeling audio recording compilations in BIBFRAME. I'll talk a little bit about what we do in MARC and two separate aggregate models that can and have been used in BIBFRAME. Finally, I will bring it all together by showing how medium of performance fits into the aggregate model with an addition of BIBFRAME contribution to fill things out. And so just to make sure we are working with the same terminology, I just want to define what I mean by compilation. Compilation here is a resource that aggregates or brings together two or more works, such as CD. While compilations appear in all formats, such as in books, you might have the complete works of Shakespeare. In audio recording publishing, they are the norm. The images on your screen show the contents lists of 3 separate compact discs. These lists are of separate BIBFRAME works aggregated each into one resource. So you can see this really is the norm for audio recordings. In MARC cataloging, we have traditionally aggregated works in 2 ways. First of all, a contents list, which may be formatted or unformatted or formatted, as you see here in the 505. And what we used to call analytical entries and now authorized access points for the individual works, which you see in the second clip at the bottom in the blue in the 700.12 fields. The first method has the benefit of offering the reader of the catalog record a listing in easily readable form, at least if your discovery layer allows that. The second method offers direct access to the controlled entry for the work. Neither of these does much to describe those individual works, however. Such descriptions may be found scattered in other parts of the MARC record, only accessible by a person reading the entire record. So how does this all translate into BIBFRAME? At the simplest level, that contents node has been directly replicated in BIBFRAME as the property BF table of contents. As in the MARC equivalent, contents is listed as a string. And it is useful for a quick scan, but otherwise is very limited, though in some cases, such as the one I give here, it might be sufficient for some people. For other compilations, we might want to describe the individual works that have been aggregated. This is where we turn to more sophisticated models. Now, in the original RDA, and here I mean by the original RDA, the RDA published in 2010, defined the resource being cataloged as the container for the aggregated expressions in a compilation. This put the aggregated expressions in a whole part relationship with the aggregating work, that is, making them part of this new aggregate. This is semantically a bit odd in that these works became part of a work over which the composer likely had no participation in the creation of. And you can see on the left here the basic model of the aggregating work, the aggregating expression, the aggregate manifestation, and the aggregating expression is the container of the aggregated expressions. You can see this in the MARC over here. They've called it works rather than expressions. This was a long confusion for us, but that's how it is shown now in MARC. Of course, BIBFRAME does not separate out expression and work as does RDA. So the model needs to be adapted. And so this is what on the right of your screen is what it would look like in RDA. But another defining aspect of this model is that the aggregated works have no direct relationship with the aggregate instance. As you see it right now, there's no line between, but rely entirely on the aggregating work to provide any context. This seems okay if incomplete when we are only talking about the aggregate in isolation. However, when we look at it in a broader linked data environment, it seems a bit lacking. Here we have an aggregating work, the purple up there, that aggregates 2 BIBFRAME works in blue. And those aggregate works are only, aggregated works are only associated with the aggregate instance through the aggregating work. However, these two aggregated works also have separate instances in which they were published separately. Work 1 has what I call instance 1A, and work 2 actually has two instances. Instance 2A, say an LP recording, and instance 2B, we could say a cassette recording. And this is a very common scenario with audio recordings. The same recording of a work, which is a work, may appear first individually, perhaps on an LP and a sound cassette, and later be reissued on a compilation CD with other works, seeing CD holds more works. It does seem inconsistent that work 1 and work 2 should have direct relationship with an instance, whereas when they are aggregated, they lose that connection, and suggests perhaps a weakness in this model. It really seems that these relationships should also be there to keep things consistent and complete. But for all its weaknesses, this is the model that is currently being used in the US, primarily because we are still using original RDA, which basically mandates this model. However, when we move to LRM, the library reference model, and official RDA, the model changes. In LRM, the aggregated expressions are independent of the aggregating expression. All the expressions are aggregated by the manifestation, as you see on the left here. Again, this model has to be simplified by BIBFRAME in moving the expression layer, as on the right, but it still basically works. This model removes that inconsistency of relationships in the original RDA model, as well as the notion that aggregated expressions of the aggregating expression, freeing them up as independent entities to be separate or aggregated as it happens. LRM also does allow for a direct relationship between the aggregated and the aggregating when necessary, but with the neutral term aggregates, as you see in those dotted lines here. PMO has taken up this term for use in BIBFRAME if necessary for particular implementations. The PMO team strongly prefers the LRM model, and we hope we will be able to move forward with this, even perhaps before we adopt the official RDA. Now, to bring this all together, compilations and medium of performance. Here we have an aggregate BIBFRAME instance with an aggregate BIBFRAME, aggregating BIBFRAME work. I've already put a music medium note, which explains from BIBFRAME, which explains that the text, that the works on this in this aggregate has one for string trio, the other for string quartet. Because we are worried about conversion a bit into MARC, this cataloger has added what we are hoping to add to the Library of Congress extension. Some descriptions of what we call BFLC read MARC 382, which sort of imitates the 382 for conversion. There could also, of course, be a contents note. This is all on the aggregating work. Then the two aggregated works, sorry about that, are then cataloged separately with links to the BIBFRAME instance. First, we have the string quartet. It has a medium type quartet, as you see here, and has three medium components. We have a cello, a viola, and a violin. And this is, of course, smushed down into one thing where they should have separate things, but it's a medium of performance violin, and the number of instruments is 2. Note that all this medium of performance information is on the aggregated work and not on the aggregating work. Then we add the string trio. It has a medium type of trio, and again, 3 medium components, 2 of which are the same as for the string quartet, cello and viola. The violin is different because there is only 1 violin as opposed to 2. And this brings everything together. And I will note again that these are actually on the individual aggregated works and not the aggregating work. So while that was the ideal model, some implementations may require that the medium of performance appear on the aggregating work. In this case, the cataloger would need to indicate which individual work the medium component is referring to this. To do this, we could use the BFLC extension property applies to, and actually for each one say which this medium of performance applies to. I would like to stress that this is not an ideal implementation, but it might be realistic in some cases. This model is heavily influenced by the MARC record, and in an environment in which we are converting to and from BIBFRAME from MARC, it may be a necessary evil, especially in conversion. But we should not forget that semantically this does not make a lot of sense, and it is not good linked data. The aggregating work does not have a medium of performance, and particularly not two conflicting mediums of performance. So finally, as a last little piece to medium of performance, I just want to point out two more PMO properties. PMO uses medium of performance and PMO dramatic role. These properties allow the cataloger to directly associate a performer with the instrument they perform on or the dramatic role they play, as in an opera. This cannot be done in MARC, and this is, I think, one of our more important additions to BIBFRAME modeling. So this modeling kind of brings us a full circle. So a performer is indicated through a BF contribution with the property BF agents, as we have here. PMO using the property uses medium of performance also links that BF contribution to the particular medium or mediums of performance the performer agent uses in the recording. So we have here. In this way, a performer can now be associated directly with the medium. As I said, something that could not be done in MARC and something long wanted by music catalogers and users. We often have people saying, we want to come in when this person is a conductor, not when they're performing on the piano or something like that. As with medium of performance, performers here are associated with the individual aggregated works in which they perform, not the aggregating work, as we tend to do now in a carryover from MARC record. If necessary for implementation or conversion, or a performer is associated in some way with the aggregate work, that connection could be made as well. But so that is the main connection, but we could also have this one here. But the link to the aggregated work is really the most important. This final modeling moves audio recording cataloging away from the single record approach forced on us by MARC and replaces it with a model that uses linked data to better carry relationships between medium works, including aggregated works, and performance for better discovery of our music by our users. So with that final flourish, we have reached the end of our presentation for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy and Kevin, for this very interesting presentation with a lot of thoughts about modeling. So we're now curious to see what the audience has questions or remarks. Frank is writing, although it's good to designate number of hands in PMO, would it also be useful to designate other performance possibilities, such as number of feet, for example, for organ duos for 4 hands and 4 feet, or use of entire body, as is sometimes the case in experimental works?
Oh,
or experimental
organists.
music works actually being addressed?
Oh, you organists. Yeah, I suppose so. We do have, in the component qualifier, we actually have a control vocabulary that has things for such as off stage or, I can't remember what they all are, obligato, things like that. Now, number of feet, we could also, we do put in the model that you can just put a BIBFRAME note as well. It's very difficult to cover every possible thing somebody might do, but I realize maybe we have ignored organists and their feet. I agree. And we might
also
want to do
have
something that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Nancy, we're going to finish. I'm sorry, were you going to finish, Nancy?
I'm good.
All right. We have another question. You mentioned that in some implementation scenarios, the medium of performance information need to be supplied to the aggregating work in BIBFRAME. And you said that this is kind of problematic. I agree. What are some examples of these implementation scenarios? And there's also another part to it as well. and this might be more of a philosophical issue, but how did your team weigh allowing this workaround versus disallowing this workaround as forcing implementations to adapt to the model?
I didn't hear most of that, but I'll talk about the first question first. I think the implementations that I'm talking about are ones that exist at this moment. I think to change our model at the moment, and that it will, requires redoing MARC to BIBFRAME and BIBFRAME to MARC conversions. So I think we needed this basically as a crutch to see us through until we can do all that kind of thing and get agreement on that. Not the best answer, but that's more what I'm thinking of in this case. And sorry, Jeanette, I really couldn't hear you in the second question.
Yeah, the second question was maybe this is a more philosophical issue. How did your team weigh allowing this workaround versus disallowing this workaround, thus forcing implementations to adapt to the model? So if I understand well, your model is still kind of open, but when it comes to implementation in the editor, you're going to make decisions, right? Whether you're trying to describe the thing from the work perspective or from the performance perspective.
Okay, I do not think we did not create the model. It's not influenced completely by implementation. We do know that our original model, we were told that it was too complicated to work with. So I suppose you could say that was an implementation decision. But on the other hand, we want people to use it. So, and also perhaps as a linked data model, it was too complicated too, in that it had too many blank nodes, basically. At least we managed to reduce the number of blank nodes here somewhat. So it's easier to search, to query.
Are you confident that others are going to implement it in the same way, so your databases are actually going to be interoperable? Or are you just creating your silo by simplifying a model that actually allows for a lot of complexities that are hard to integrate in the end?
Well, we are working on this in tandem with the Library of Congress catalogers. So hopefully in North America at least, or in the United States at least, we will be doing it somewhat similarly. I am personally often in contact with the European BIBFRAME community and people like ShareVDE, and if I'm hoping we will all get there eventually, but interoperability of BIBFRAME implementations is a bigger question than just the Performed Music Ontology, let's say.
Okay, thank you. And there's a very basic question. I think it's important to explain that, maybe if people in the audience haven't understood that. Can you please explain the difference between aggregated work and aggregating work, and then use an example? I continually have difficulty remembering the difference.
Maybe I should share my screen for a sec. It would be easier if I go back to this. Okay. If we take this CD up in the top right, Kinloch's Fantasy, okay? You can see we have multiple works here. Phonics of Beer, When She Came, Ben, Loch Ness, Cape Breton Compliments, Mac Minuets, The Thistle, Blackjack, McLean Sonata, etc. These are all individual, in this case, BIBFRAME works that are recordings of work. In the more Ferber LRM sense, they are recordings of works, expressions of works that are gathered together on this one CD. The CD is a manifestation. And according to the models, this aggregate manifestation then creates an aggregating expression and an aggregating work. Of course, in BIBFRAME, it would only be creating an aggregating work because there is no expression. So the aggregating work probably has the title of Kinloch's Fantasy, okay? It's the whole thing. Well, the aggregated works are those works that have been aggregated into that aggregating expression in this in aggregate manifestation in LRM, and that is those individual works on the CD. Is that clear with an example?
Yeah, I think at the conceptual level, we're kind of jumping between a CD, which is like something you can touch in the end, and on the other hand, you have performances of actual works, musical works. So we have like the CD work on one hand, and on the other hand, you have the musical works. Right.
The CD work is, yeah. I mean, when you get to LRM, it's not the CD work is not a musical work.
No.
It's the actual Stephen Hearn. You could probably give me the definition better. Again, it's very hard. It's basically a plan to bring together a group of works in a particular order. And in LRM, they are aggregated through the manifestation.
So Frank, did that answer your question? No, sorry, who was that? It was Joshua.
No, Joshua Henry. He also has a comment. Yes,
yeah,
but in some ways, it doesn't seem necessary. Why can't we just say that the aggregating work has works rather than the aggregated works? It seems to be an extra layer.
We don't actually define something in the model as it still has the same property, whether it is an individual work or whether it's an aggregating work.
Yeah, I think this is exactly because of this conceptual jump between the CD work and the musical work that it wouldn't make sense to just say that the CD work has musical works as its parts.
Yeah,
it wouldn't make sense.
This is the problem that then it has no manifestation related to it. And that was the original RDA model. But it is not the LRM model, and it's not what official RDA now uses. So.
And we have another question from Frank Ferko. Is there a way to address environmental sounds in PMO, such as recordings of cello performed outside with sounds of the environment?
Kevin, you want to answer that one?
I don't think there's no structured way to do this. I think maybe someday we will have it, there will be a way to address location of recording is outdoors with the birds or something like that. But, Frank, you keep asking about all these exceptions, and that was the whole point of us simplifying it this year. We could say number of appendages and then type of appendage, but then, what if it's not we can go down so many roads to
how many birds of which species?
Yes.
Male or female, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there is vocabulary for like natural sounds of various types and some of them are even in the medium of performance thesaurus that we use. That it's outside, I don't think we actually have. We have off stage, but again, you could put in a note, which is a generic way to address it, perhaps. But yeah,
so there's also a comment, I think, from Kimi Seto. The second part updated, forcing implementations to make the aggregating work inherit the info from the instances. Chirac. Do you understand the comment?
I think it actually, ideally, it would be the opposite, where each individual work could inherit, for instance, the medium performance of the overall aggregate. Like let's say we had a CD called Kimizeto performed piano of his favorite songs, right? So are we like, and it has 50 songs on it. And is there a way to inherit piano 1 as a medium performance at the aggregate level, and then have all the things that are all the works, individual works, take on
the recordings. So they're not works, they're recordings.
Recordings of BIBFRAME works are recordings.
You won't attach. You can't attach the instrument this way to the work.
Yeah, no, in BIBFRAME, the recording is the work.
Yeah, but it will always we will always bump into conceptual discussions like that. Obviously, you cannot inherit the instrument up to the actual Ferber work. When you start from a CD.
I don't.
Yeah, you're right. We like if we had a CD with a single medium of performance and we wanted each individual recorded work to inherit that would be ideal. I think if we're talking about Ferber works, the conceptual work that, of course, that goes above what is on the CD recording. But in BIBFRAME, a work is an audio. I mean, it's an audio recording or a piece of notated music. So we're a step down from that Ferber idealized concept.
Right.
Yeah, the question is whether you ever want to kind of follow the graph through the various works to its various expressions and manifestations, or whether you're just happy to stay with your recordings.
Well, I think that is another part of the model we have worked on in the past, is how we join all these into a more generic work aspect. There has been a lot of work done on that since by the Library of Congress. And I noticed the Library of Congress Hub has now become part of BIBFRAME, so that's something we can talk about. And as Tom said, I mean, if we look, I'm not showing my screen anymore. It'd help if I did. If we look at this album, this CD over here on the left, and I'm just giving you the CD because it has a contents list, okay?
You're not sharing your screen right now.
Oh, now I am.
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay, if you see all these works on here, all these works were originally, well, there might have been a couple of them together, but they were actually issued on separate LPs on 33 1/3 inch discs. So La Mer and say L'après-midi d'enfant, they appeared on one LP. The Maurice Raval and the Daphnis, the works appeared on a separate LP. They still all had the same medium of performance, those two things. They are still the same in Ferber sense or an LRM sense, they are still the same expression of that work. In BIBFRAME, they are the same BIBFRAME work. They just happen to be now aggregated on a different manifestation.
Okay, so we have another question from Tom. As the new PMO is adopted in BIBFRAME scenarios, will changes to the MARC format be needed or at least encoding best practices adopted for data conversion? Will these allow for round-trip ability? Is that for Kevin?
I don't know. I would assume there could be some best practices put in place to assist with conversion. I don't know, round trip ability sounds really iffy to me, but maybe I don't have an imagination.
Yeah, I expect our new model does not do round trip ability. That is why we are sort of introducing the BFLC thing as a crutch that sort of imitates the 382. That can then be somehow, that was the only answer we have for it right now, because no, we do not think it will round trip. Some of it does. You can convert the 382, and I have actually created some conversion specs, but they will not be perfect by any means. But you can get something.
Then there was another comment by Tom. Yeah, but albums which have separate songs can be works too. That's just a comment.
Tom,
I guess we agree.
So maybe you can explain.
I think he's just saying that it's, we can conceive of an album, let's say a popular music album, as a work in itself. And that work contains 8 songs, which are also works in themselves. And we, as users, we often do conceive of things as albums, non-classical albums, as a work in itself. You speak about Dark Side of the Moon as a work, even though it has, I don't know how many songs it has on it. It has a bunch of songs on it. So, I think, I don't know where Tom's going with this, except that I think we have to be flexible with our implementations. I don't know.
Like Sarah McLachlan album in the middle here could very easily be thought of as a whole musical work as well in some ways. So.
Okay, I think we have almost reached the end of our Q&A session. Maybe I will ask you a question as well. Have you ever considered using Wikidata in combination with your databases? I was thinking of it, I was triggered by when you kind of mentioned the voice type. There's a controlled vocabulary on Wikidata for that. Are you using that one, or are you using something else?
That voice type was in BIBFRAME, and I think it was actually defined as a literal that. So it would be hard to use Wikidata unless you just use the string. We are fairly enthusiastic, at least I am personally, about using Wikidata for a lot of stuff, yes. One thing I really like about it for ensembles, music ensembles, is it does differentiate clearly between like a string quartet that is made up of 2 violins, a viola, and a cello, as opposed to a string quartet that is made up of 2 violinists, a violist, and a cellist. Those are really 2 different things, even though they share much in common. And I think that's a really good thing that Wikidata has done. It didn't used to do that, and now it does, actually. So I really like that.
So it's a place to go to look at various modeling solutions.
We did look at it as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot. If there are no more questions coming up, I think we'll close that session. Many thanks to both Nancy and Kevin for this presentation. Just reading a comment by Frank Ferko. And thank you to the audience, to all of you, for your interest in these topics.
What did Frank say this time? Oh. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Have a good time and take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'm stopping the recording now.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, it worked quite well, and timing was perfect.
Thank you both. That was really
We
great.
did okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, enjoy the rest of the conference.
You too.
You too.
Here it's already evening, approaching like 8 o'clock.
Still only 10 past 11 here. So.
Yeah, I know. You still have the day ahead of you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I might actually contact you regarding the linked open data ecosystem network. So
Sure. Okay.
that would be maybe an interesting point where we can reconnect or something.
Sure thing.
But we're obviously always kind of describing from the performance side, and not so much from the recording work side.
Right. Well, yeah, we would really like to talk about that. So,
So
say your first name again.
take care.